Well, good morning, everyone. Happy Wednesday morning to you. Welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I'm the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. I really appreciate you being with me. Thank you for the fact that you're sharing this channel with others. Thank you for the fact that we continue to grow. I know we're not viral. Hopefully, one of these days we might be that. Who knows? So anyway, want to continue because this is, I tell you, this whole theme that I'm discussing with you right here is to me some of the most definitive, some of the most powerful, some of the most irrefutable proof that the Olivet Discourse cannot be divided into two subjects, i.e., the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70, verses 1 to 34, and then the prediction of the so-called end of time. Now look, I was raised believing that. It's all I ever heard. It was the position taught to me in seminary. It was the position that every major minister, teacher, professor that I ever listened to taught. It's just not true. And so, as I've been sharing with you over how many months now? Over a year. When we look at the interconnectedness between the Old Covenant prophecies, Old Covenant themes, Old Covenant promises, and how the New Testament writers quote from, they cite, they allude to those very Old Testament prophecies, and they apply them to their generation. They never apply them to a time far removed. That really ought to be challenging to us if we're going to try to apply the New Testament passages to some event at the end of the, oh, by the way, endless Christian age. And yet, futurists seem to just, never mind, it's not important. But it is important. So, here's what I've been sharing with you over the last few videos, all right? Matthew chapter 25, 31 and following, which virtually all futurist commentators apply to the supposed end of the current age, say, okay, this is the coming of the Lord for the wedding of Matthew 25, 1 to 13. Okay, no problem with that. I believe it's accurate. Well, guess what? We come over to Revelation, and in the judgment of the city called Babylon, which is where the Lord was crucified, which is the city that killed the Old Testament prophets, which is the city guilty of shedding all the blood shed on the earth, which is basically a direct quote from Matthew chapter 23. In the judgment of that city, Revelation chapter 19, verse 6, let us be glad and rejoice, for the time of the marriage has come. Now, let's keep in mind, folks, according to Matthew chapter 22, the time of the marriage had arrived in the first century and is inextricably bound to the time of the judgment of Jerusalem, Matthew 22, verse 7. So we have this total consistency of the motif of the wedding. Now, once again, catch the power of this. Matthew chapter 25, 31 and following, the coming of the Lord for the wedding. Revelation chapter 19, the coming of the Lord for the wedding, taken directly from Isaiah chapter 62, the coming of the Lord for the wedding, the coming of the Lord at the time of the judgment, the coming of the Lord at the time of the diorthosis, which according to Hebrews chapter 9, verse 6 to 10, would be the end of the Old Covenant age, the end of the Old Covenant, i.e., the time when the Old Covenant would be completely fulfilled. And Jesus in Matthew 16, 27 and 28, as we saw yesterday, quoted from Isaiah chapter 62 in saying, "The Son of Man will come in the glory of the Father with his angels and shall reward every man according to his works." Now, I've got to give a real brief digression here. I mentioned it ever so briefly, but I've really got to pay attention to it here. I want to get you focused on this reality. The promise of the coming of the Lord with his reward of Isaiah 62 is really just an echo and a reiteration of the promise of Isaiah chapter 40. Well, what's Isaiah 40? Well, let's see. This is fantastic. Isaiah chapter 40. A voice crying in the wilderness, "Make straight in the wilderness a highway for our God. Let every valley be filled, let every mountain be brought low. For behold, our God comes, and his reward is with him." Isaiah chapter 40, 10 and 11. "Your Lord shall come with his strong arm, and he shall rule, and his reward is with him." So here's Isaiah chapter 62, promising the coming of the Lord with his reward. At the time when every mountain would be brought low, every valley would be filled, a highway would be prepared for the believers in God, the worshipers of God, to come to him and to serve him and to be blessed by him. A voice in the wilderness, "Make straight in the highway," or desert, a highway for our God. Well, wait a minute. Who's the voice? You know who the voice is. In Mark chapter 1, verses 1 to 3, the evangelist quotes Isaiah 40 verbatim and applies it to John the Baptizer. So John is the voice. John, therefore, is the voice. And by the way, when the Pharisees, Sadducees, and scribes came out to John in John chapter 1 saying, "Are you the one? Are you the Messiah? Are you the one we're looking for?" No. "Are you the prophet?" No. "Well, who are you?" "I am the voice of one crying in the wilderness, make straight in the desert a highway for our God." So we have Mark testifying that John was the voice. We have John testifying he was the voice. What was the voice to do? Create a highway for the coming of the Lord. Okay, let's face it, ladies and gentlemen. I don't really think that John, as the voice, was to build a literal highway so that Jesus could come in judgment on that highway. Do you? Really? Honestly? I'm reminded of Grant Jeffrey, who passed away some years ago now. Grant Jeffrey said there's not a single Old Testament prophecy that is ever fulfilled spiritually. And when I read his book, and I read that quote in his book, I just literally laughed out loud. I was like, seriously? So here is John, who is the voice of one crying in the wilderness, saying, "Make every valley full, every mountain low, make straight in the desert a highway for our God." Now, Mr. Jeffrey was evidently woefully ignorant of the language of army invasion and warfare. Because you see, in ancient times, what happened? When an army was going to invade another country, what did they do? They sent out crews to make highways, to make a highway for the travel of the army. By the way, in the Jewish War of 66 to 70, Josephus records that in Vespasian's invasion of northern Israel and the city of Jaffa, he sent out his crew who built a highway. They cleared the roads. They cut down the timber. They made a straight highway for the invasion of Vespasian into Judea or into Israel. That's the language of armies invading other lands, ladies and gentlemen. Now, the great question, therefore, becomes, in response to Grant Jeffries, who claims that no Old Testament prophecy was ever fulfilled literally, we need to be shown by someone that John the Baptizer ever did any road grading, ever filled up a single valley. We need to be shown where John the Baptizer ever did any excavating to lower any mountain. And we need to be shown where he built a literal, physical, straight highway. Where would the highway start and where would it end if it's for the coming of the Lord in judgment? I mean, since the Lord's in heaven and he's going to come to earth, see, ostensibly, according to Grant Jeffries' view, then if no Old Testament prophecy was ever fulfilled spiritually, then Mr. Jeffries or his followers should be able to demonstrate that somehow, some way, John built a highway, a literal physical highway from heaven, which is kind of a spiritual entity or dimension, from that dimension to earth, so that Christ could come in judgment. It's not talking about his incarnation. Okay? So back to the point. Well, let me continue. In Isaiah 40, John is the voice of one crying in the wilderness. What was John's message? Now remember, this is the coming of the Lord to bring the kingdom, for God to rule. His reward is with him. So, here is the coming of the Lord in judgment and the kingdom. What did Jesus say in Matthew 16, 27 and 28? The Son of Man will come in the glory of the Father with his angels and shall reward every man according to his works. Is that the reward? Is that the salvation of Isaiah 40? Well, let's see. What was John's message? Repent, for the kingdom, that's the rule of God of Isaiah chapter 40, verse 10 and 11. His reward is with him. He shall reward every man according to his works. And verily I say unto you, there are some standing here, that was 2,000 years ago. I think you're going to agree with me, in spite of Mormon claims, we don't have any 2,000-year-old men running around in our world today. Nope. There are some standing here which shall not taste of death until they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. Isaiah chapter 40, the coming of the Lord in judgment and reward, the coming of the Lord in the kingdom. Matthew 16, 27 and 28, the coming of the Lord in judgment, in the kingdom, in the lifetime of that generation. And John the Baptizer said, repent, for the kingdom of heaven has drawn near. And John the Baptizer said of that kingdom, of that coming of the Lord, the axe is already at the root. Folks, you can't get any clearer language of imminence than that. You know, I've cut down a good number of trees in my life. And by the way, I used to do that with an axe while I was in seminary. It's the only way we had to heat our house. Pioneer days. And I want to tell you, if the axe is already at the root, that's imminence. So when we conflate, when we connect the dots between Isaiah 40, Isaiah 62, John the Baptizer, Matthew 3, and Matthew 16, 27 and 28, what do we have? We have a perfect, harmonious, and irrefutable commentary proving that the coming of the Lord in his kingdom of Matthew chapter 25, 31 and following, the time of the coming of the Lord in the judgment, and the time of the coming of the Lord for the wedding was in AD 70. And yeah, we've even got more yet. But we'll have to wait till Monday in order to do that. Don't forget, tomorrow I will continue my response to some of the objections to my brand new book. Here it is, Temple to Telos. All right? You don't want to miss it, okay? And let me take note again. You know, I've produced 3 videos so far answering some of the objections. No one has said a word about any of my responses in these 3 videos. Every single one of the comments have basically said, well, yeah, but you haven't answered this objection yet. Well, to recall a movie, a TV show from years ago, patience, grasshopper. We'll get to it. Okay? I'll see you on the flip side.